So good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on understanding anxiety in the workplace. My name is Alice Hardigan. I'm one of the project officers working on the WAM team in AHEAD. And working on tech support today is my colleague, Deirdre Moore, the employment manager in AHEAD. So thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome back to anyone who has attended one of our webinars in the past, and a very warm welcome to anyone joining us for the first time. Just before we get started, there's a few housekeeping bits to address. So live captioning is available for any attendees who wish to watch the webinar with subtitles. To turn these on, you can click the CC button at the bottom of your screen. As mentioned, my colleague Deirdre is working with me today in the background, and she'll be sharing links in the chat box and answering some of your questions via the Q&A feature. So if you do have questions for our speaker, please do use the Q&A feature, as it is easier for us to keep track of, and it just makes sure we don't miss anything along the way. But the chat box is open, so feel free to comment or to chat with each other. And to get us started, you might tell us where you're watching in from today. I see a lot of you have already done that. I myself am hosting today's session from the lovely sunny Southeast. And we'd also encourage you to share about the event on social media. So if you do this, we would ask that you might use the hashtag WAMinar. This will allow you to connect with each other and also to see who's talking about today's event. So finally, just to let you know that the slides and links from the event will be shared with you afterwards, and there is a recording happening, and this will be made available via our YouTube channel in the coming week or so. So we have over 380 people registered for today's session, and we want to get a sense of who's watching today. So Deirdre, I might ask you to launch a poll so everyone can let us know where they're joining from. So we have two polls for you today. It should be up on your screen now. So the first one there is to please select the option most appropriate to you. And there's a couple of ones here. This is kind of the working area that you're in. So you're a hiring manager, a line manager, a regular employee. You may be the designated disability or access officer. You could work in HR, or you don't meet any of the above. And if you scroll down, there's another poll. So that's asking what kind of sector you work in. So further education, higher education, NGO, nonprofit, private employer, public sector, or semi-state employer, or again, I don't meet any of the above. So you might just take a bit of time to fill those in just to get a sense of kind of who's in the room with us today. And while you are filling in those polls, I might take a moment to tell you a bit about AHEAD and the WAM program. AHEAD works with and for disabled people to shape inclusive and empowering environments in tertiary education and employment. AHEAD has been around since 1988, and the Willing, Able and Mentoring Programme, or WAM for short, has been a project of AHEAD since 2005. The WAM programme is funded by the Department of Social Protection, and it works with employers to provide paid graduate-level internships or placements for graduates with disabilities. This is done by ring-fencing roles for a minimum of 6 months, and we've placed over 680 graduates to date, and 81% of our graduates secure full-time work as a direct result of their WAM placement. So we have several great WAM opportunities advertised throughout the year. And currently we are advertising our annual campaign with the Civil Service, which is a 10-month placement opportunity for graduates with disabilities in departments across the country. The minimum requirement is a level 6 across all disciplines. And the Civil Service also runs a confined competition for a permanent position in the departments for WAM graduates after their placement. We have many more opportunities all throughout the year. So please spread the word to anyone who might be interested in applying for WAM placement. More information can be found on our website, which is www.ahead.ie. So I also just want to take the opportunity to share a new exciting project with you and extend an invite for you to get involved. So AHEAD are developing a new collaborative national framework called the WIDE framework, which is Widening Inclusion of Disability in Employment. This is funded by the Department of Social Protection through AHEAD's WAM program. And Employers for Change are also collaborating on the project with the role of co-chair of the core advisory group alongside AHEAD. So the aim of the WIDE framework is to support employers in reducing barriers to hiring, retaining, and promoting more people with disabilities, and to create more inclusive working environments. The WIDE framework will be set of structured principles and actions that will have guidance notes and resources to support employers. And it is expected that the WIDE framework will launch in September of 2025, so next year. The WIDE framework will be informed by extensive consultation and engagement with key stakeholders, including disabled people, employers, relevant organizations, and representative bodies. We have completed a consultation with disabled people in August, just passed, and AHEAD is now asking employers to express their interest in sharing their views in an employer consultation. These are expected to take place on October 23rd or 24th of next month. So the aim of this consultation is to better understand the experiences of public and private sector employers from a range of sectors, industries, and backgrounds who employ or wish to employ disabled people. This learning will be used to help further develop the national framework for employers to support them to hire, retain, and promote more people with disabilities and to create workspaces where they can succeed. So if you are interested in taking part in this consultation as an employer who employs or would like to employ people with disabilities, we'd like you to express your interest by the 25th of September, which is next week. Deirdre will pop a link into the chat box for you to read more and register, and this will also be circulated with the slides after today's event as well with a bit more information. So back to our polls, Deirdre, I might just ask you to end the poll.
Yeah,
and share
sorry
the
to
results.
interrupt, Alice. Our captioner has a slight tech issue, so we might do the poll and just hold off to make sure she's back before we get Michael speaking, if that's okay.
Sure, no problem. Great, so the polls have ended there, so they should come up on your screen, but I'll just read out some of the results. So I can see there that 37% said you're a regular employee. I won't read through them all, but just to give you an idea, there's line managers here, 16% of the audience, 12% are the designated disability or access officer. We got 20% working in HR, 2% as hiring managers, and then there's actually a good few people here, 13% don't meet any of the above. And then just the sector that you worked in. So seemingly by and large, 54% is public sector or semi-state employers. So that's quite a lot of you guys. Following that, we have higher education staff at 13%, further education is 6%, the NGO or nonprofit sector is 12%, there's a private employer group here, 10%, and again, a couple of you guys, 5% is don't meet any of the above. So that's just to give you a flavor, I suppose, of who's joining us today. It's kind of helpful for us to know kind of who's in the audience and who we're speaking to. So before I continue, I might just check in to see if the captioner is okay.
I haven't seen her back online, Alice, so I think we might just pause for a couple of minutes until we know she's back. So if everyone wants to just hold tight and we'll get her up and running in a minute.
Okay, no problem.
Maybe Michael can get his slides up and start getting ready, and hopefully she'll be back then.
Sure. Just to let everyone know while we are waiting there, that our sessions are recorded and we do have a YouTube channel with all of our previous webinars available. So they'll be up in the next week or so. But if you've missed some of our webinars in the past, we've got a whole extension collection of webinars available on a range of topics. Recently, we've done topics on migraine awareness, ADHD in the workplace. We have lots of different ones, vision impairment, neurodiversity. So there's lots of learning to be had on our YouTube channel. So I think I see the captioner is back. So I might push on.
All good.
Yep. Okay, perfect. So I'll just introduce the webinar topic then. So today's webinar topic aims to raise awareness and understanding about anxiety in the workplace. An estimated 4% of the global population currently experience an anxiety disorder. And according to the recent WAM Programme Statistics 2023 publication, to date, the most common disability of a placed WAM graduate is now a mental health condition at 20%. In the first 10 years of the WAM programme, on average, 1 in every 10 graduates presented with multiple or co-occurring disabilities. However, in recent years, this figure has increased, and in the last 5 years alone, from 2018 to 2023, over 1 in 3 graduates are now disclosing multiple disabilities. And while we don't have actually a breakdown for these co-occurring disabilities, anecdotally, the WAM team frequently come across anxiety as a co-occurring disability in the graduate's needs assessment process. With World Suicide Prevention Day just passed in September and World Mental Health Day approaching in October, we thought this might be a fitting topic for this webinar. Which brings me to introduce our guest speaker. So joining me today is Michael Ledden, psychotherapist and founder of Anxiety Ireland. After gaining profound insights into his own overactive mind and anxiety over 10 years ago during his therapy journey, Michael was driven to establish Anxiety Ireland in 2018 after qualifying as a psychotherapist. His motivation stemmed from a deep concern for what he perceived as a hidden epidemic clients grappling with a myriad of anxiety-related challenges in their everyday existence. Anxiety Ireland provides information, encouragement, and expert psychotherapy to those suffering with anxiety in Ireland. And they provide CBT, psychotherapy, couples counselling, and adolescent counselling, and enable you to book directly with their network of accredited therapists to manage, transform, and overcome any anxiety issue. So before we continue, just a reminder to those joining us today that if you do have questions along the way, you might pop them in the Q&A box, and we can talk through these at the end of the session. We will leave time for a Q&A section. So welcome, Michael. I might pass over to you for the presentation today, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Alice, and everyone from ahead. And thank you, everyone, for joining. It's a great pleasure to be here to talk about a topic that I'm really passionate about, which is, yeah, really understanding anxiety in the workplace. So Alice kind of already gave a little bit of a background on myself there. There we go. So, but just in general, yeah, I suppose I'm a CBT and integrative psychotherapist, and founded Anxiety Ireland in 2018. I think when I started learning more about anxiety, and I noticed, oh my God, I do a lot of these things. Like, I have behaviors where I'm double checking things a lot. I'm kind of, maybe frequently I go to thinking of the worst, or I worry, or I beat myself up. All these things which I just thought were normal, I kind of realized, well, actually, maybe things don't necessarily have to be that way. And I could see the negative impact it was having on me. I also did my placement in DIT, as it was then, and nearly every student who came to me was suffering or struggling with some kind of anxiety. So that's, in kind of a nutshell, why I really felt passionate that there should be maybe more of a bespoke service for people to learn more about anxiety and to get support. And today is very much kind of maybe part of that mission, educating people seeking employment, and perhaps some of you guys as the employers, or maybe as the universities and program managers out there assisting people. So yeah, and just Anxiety Ireland, we provide support, information, and therapy to anyone. And I suppose in my own practice, I have huge experience working with clients with all the different types of anxiety that we'll probably touch on a little bit today. So like general anxiety, social anxiety, health anxiety, panic, OCD, PTSD, phobias, health anxiety in twice for good measure, relationship anxiety, self-esteem. And all these things can, of course, affect people in their general life, but they can also massively come into their work as well. You know, it's very hard, that whole, oh, well, you know, sometimes an anxiety is in just one area, but oftentimes how can it not? You know, your work affects your life and your life affects your work. So yes, and that's my thing. I really just love seeing people remove the blocks that are in their way and reaching their potential. So today, the little plan is we'll probably have maybe 50-55 minutes for a talk, and then 10-15 minutes for questions. So I have a plan for some things I'm going to cover, but, you know, very much in the questions, just to say, this talk is recorded, but in the questions part, we'll stop the recording, or that'll get edited out. So if you want to ask, you know, any kind of questions where you'd rather not be recorded, it's a safe space for that, and we'll you know, try and hold that confidentiality for each other as well today. So today, some of the topics that I want to kind of touch into, before we dive into anything about the workplace, I suppose just I'd like to explain from my point of view, what is anxiety, give you guys maybe a little bit of an introduction, because it can be a bit of a buzzword that's thrown around. You know, it's a fairly prevalent term, and it's a very nearly kind of complicated phenomenon. So I'd like to just give maybe kind of a definition that I've found really helpful. I'd also love to cover, you know, the important difference between like fear, stress, and anxiety, because you go, you know, what is it? Is it stress? Is it anxiety? Or is it actually fear? So I think that can be just an important little thing to break down, because anxiety does have similarities with fear and stress, but also maybe it has its own little nuances that we can kind of go into, which will help maybe people understand what it is that's affecting them, or to see what could be affecting employees or new hires. We'll also just look at on the main different types of anxiety that can be out there, and how this can possibly present in the workplace. So those kind of main types I already briefly touched on. We're going to talk maybe about some of the barriers faced by those with anxiety when it comes to securing employment, and also in their development and confidence in the workplace. So for these, if these ring true for anyone listening, it might be you might be a little bit like me in that then you might go, huh, wow, I'm experiencing some of these things. Could it be a little bit of, low-lying anxiety, or maybe something that doesn't seem so obvious might get a little clearer from this talk. Then we're going to talk about how can managers, employers, but we could also call that, student services, lecturers, or anyone who's assisting anybody. How can they be more anxiety aware, and maybe what are some of the nice accommodations that they could provide to support colleagues or students. And then we'll finally just talk a little bit about disclosure of anxiety in the workplace, and just maybe to end it off, about why do people not disclose anxiety, and how can we make an environment more friendly, where something like anxiety, which is so common, as Alice said, that can be, just openly acknowledged and talked about. It's not this big taboo anymore, hopefully. And then we'll have time for questions. So so I suppose to dive right in, getting into what are we talking about when we talk about anxiety? So yeah, for me, I would kind of say it is a very complex emotional state. It's anxiety for one person isn't the same for someone else. We're all maybe talking about a different experience when it comes to our anxiety, and indeed anxiety can morph and change over time. But I'd say some of the things we'd be looking out for if we were thinking, gosh, am I experiencing anxiety, would be persistent negative thoughts, maybe harsh beliefs or expectations about life, self, or others. Maybe that's, someone feeling that the world is a very unsafe place, people are very judgy or very critical or negative about themselves. In a work context, that might be feeling maybe something like imposter syndrome, or feeling a lot of pressure to be perfect. A huge characteristic would always be discomfort with uncertainty. Come into my office, I want to talk to you in 10 minutes. Something like that for someone with anxiety, something that's uncertain, waiting for something to happen, that is often a fertile breeding ground for worry and for negative thoughts. So there's often quite a discomfort with uncertainty, maybe not liking change. We'll often see behavioral changes. So someone with anxiety, we might see that there's an awful lot of double, triple checking, or perhaps avoidance, avoiding putting their camera on in the meeting, or avoiding giving that talk, or maybe seeking excessive reassurance, the employee, that no matter how many times you tell them they're brilliant or that they're doing well, that they need a little bit more. So there can be that behavioral element to look out for. And those come in different degrees, but nearly always there's, I'd say, an excessive activation of the body's fight or flight response. So we're going to talk about what that is now in a moment. I'm sure maybe many people here have heard of, the fight or flight, or your nervous system, this automatic part of the body that kicks in. And yeah, just due to the mind-body connection, anxiety can manifest in some or all, but not necessarily all of these areas. So mentally, physically, emotionally, behaviorally. And it's important to recognize that while anxiety can be a normal response to stress or negative events, it can become problematic when it's persistent, excessive, and impacts one's ability to lead a fulfilling life. So, who doesn't maybe get a little bit anxious? They've got their driving test coming up, and maybe they're experiencing negative thoughts about it, harsh expectations on themselves, discomfort with the uncertainty. They just wish it would just come on. Behavioral changes. Maybe they're, over preparing, or really worrying, or feeling an excessive activation of their fight or flight. But normally when that passes, maybe they return to normal. But with anxiety, it might start to become that this becomes nearly their normal response to any kind of event that's coming up. So, and again, where the best place to understand the roots of this is probably in our nervous system. Again, that fight or flight response. So, again, we all have a completely automatic nervous system that operates within us. We can have some limited control over it, but mostly it is automatic. So they say we kind of float between these different states of, they call it fight or flight or sympathetic activation, as in we're sympathetic or in tune to danger. Or we're in maybe more of a parasympathetic, a rest, heal, and digest, a connection, that kind of, oh, I can just relax. I can slow down. I've fallen asleep after the Christmas dinner, that kind of thing. I'm in a nice, safe place. I feel connected. Those processes are very much kind of always going on, that we can tip from one to another. Think, almost stepping in, almost a car hits you on the motorway, or you're almost, something dangerous happens, instantly your body will kick in. That fight or flight is there to keep us safe, which is good. So, we all have this innate ability to go between these two, almost between relaxed and defensive. But it's not only, I suppose, danger that can trigger that, as we're going to explore now. So I want to kind of go into, what activates our fight or flight. And I'd say, we could look at across maybe three different kinds of stimuli that could activate our fight or flight. So that's, again, our friends, fear, stress, and anxiety. So very much, we could look at what I'd call kind of fear, or you could call it a perception of danger, will certainly cause a fight or flight reaction. So, and maybe many of you have experienced this, when you're faced with something that is actually a physical threat or a danger, you perceive that, pick that up. It could be someone maybe trying to rob you, turning the corner and there's a giant tiger there. Obviously, a soldier in war, an assault, all these things will kick in the fight or flight response. And when we have fight or flight, what we're looking probably at is changes to our breathing. Our breathing is gearing up as if we're getting ready to run or put up a fight. Heart rate will go up. Digestive problems are very common. Could be sweating, trembling, changes in vision, get kind of very tunnel vision, thoughts speed up. All these things, which are very useful if you're actually in a dangerous situation. They tell stories about, a big bookshelf falls on someone's child, and suddenly the fight or flight kicks in, and the tiny, maybe it's the mother, or who's quite petite, is able to lift something that there's no way she'd have been able to lift before. And that's because the fight or flight is kicking in. Or you can run faster than you ever knew you could possibly run. Again, fight or flight, trying to keep you safe. But another thing that kicks off the same system is what we might call stress. So stress being the fight or flight reaction to what we can experience as excessive pressure or demands placed upon us. So, and we could call that, there can be two different types, eustress or distress. Distress being when we're completely maybe overwhelmed, we're trying to use our fight or flight. Like, think the night before you're going on holidays and you're trying to get all your work done, or you have a big deadline, that little bit of extra stress, or a college essay, maybe that helps you to concentrate, to perform a little bit better. But distress is maybe when that stress, it becomes way too much and we become overwhelmed. So stress, uses our fight or flight to help us to get things done. But obviously there is a limit to that, and it pushes us into burnout. So that's external pressures coming in, both of those, danger or pressure to get things done. But when we come to talk about maybe what's the difference between fear and stress and anxiety, with anxiety, it's the fight or flight reaction caused perhaps by what's going on internally within us, what's going on in terms of our thought processes. Are we persistently worrying about the future, or caught in a negative loop of thinking? Maybe worry about the past repeating itself. We've had a negative experience, and our brain remembers negative experiences more than positive experiences, so we worry about that. Worrying what could occur if things happen. So what if thinking is very common in anxiety. What if this? What if that? What if the company closes? What if I freeze in the interview? What if I get fired? Sometimes even fighting our own feelings can cause anxiety. We go, oh, I'm the I never get angry. We have this belief about ourselves, or I always must say yes to people, and we keep saying yes and yes and yes. That's kind of increasing pressure on us. Again, pressure we place on ourselves. I must be perfect. I must never be late. Um, I have to have, everyone must think that I'm, really in control, or else it's going to be awful. Sometimes awfulizing things, ourselves or others, intrusive mental images. So this list isn't really exhaustive. There's so many different ways that what's going on in our psyche can inform then an activation of our fight or flight. And I always like to say as well, there's different causes, but it activates the same system, and that our nervous system is always listening to our mind. So you could be walking down the street and walking over to, over to the park, and then you get a thought in your mind, what if I left the iron on? One thought, your nervous system listens to that and picks that up. So, and with anxiety, I often find we never get that kind of relief, or we never get that break. When a stressful situation is there, or a dangerous one, either we get eaten, or whatever happens with the driving test or the stress, it passes. We get our rest and digest kicks in, we get a relief. But often people with anxiety are stuck in that highly persistent level of fight or flight activation for the long term, and that can be really, really damaging to their body, their self-esteem, and everything. So, and sometimes I like to bring in this little kind of graph about, well, why do we get anxious? What the hell is this about? And I like to sort of think of it as it's a little bit to do with our human evolution, because if you think about it, we all have parents and grandparents and great grandparents and great 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 and great 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 great. But if you actually go back, we actually started somewhere very, as maybe a single cell organism at one stage, crawling out of the ocean. So, so I like to think about, the brain has evolved, that we have this kind of lizard brain, which is the oldest part of the brain, the amygdala, where we're very tuned into danger and sensitive to that. So that's the part that just activates when danger comes along. But then probably, hundreds and hundreds of millions of years later, we evolved into mammals. So we began to, instead of being kind of outside of social groups, mammals will often form social groups and have social norms. And being expelled from those groups was actually probably akin to a death sentence when we were living in tribal societies. So all of a sudden, our things like being accepted, being good enough, being loved, all of these things, which are great things, became really important to us, but they also become linked to our actual perception of danger. I think one survey showed that a load of soldiers, they actually said, would you rather be back on the front line, or would you rather give a talk to whatever, 100 or 1,000 people? And most of them said, oh no, actually put me in the front line any day. So that whole thing, and that which can come into work as well, hierarchies, social structures becomes a thing. So we have that piece of evolution. And then, of course, latterly then we developed more of our prefrontal cortex, which was our ability, which it seems animals are not able to do this, that we can, categorize memories and have a defined sense of self, and have, the ability to think in terms of what if this, what if that. Whereas say your pet dog, maybe they've had a tough time, they might feel skittish, their nervous system might be raw, but they're probably not thinking about, oh my God, what if my owner doesn't come home tonight? What if he's in a car crash, or she's in a car crash? It seems like only humans are able to do that. So we kind of have this slow evolution of the brain, with all these different parts, where now it can be, what if this dangerous thing happens? What if that happens? What if this person rejects me? What if they see me like this? What if they see me like that? I should be this, I should be that. And so, and every human is very complicated in that. So, every time you're working with someone or looking at someone with anxiety, you're maybe seeing all these different things play out. And it is complicated, and it's not maybe your job to figure it out, but maybe in the next section we'll be talking about, knowing some of the signs so that you can signpost people in the right direction. So, having covered a little bit about fear, stress, and anxiety, and what is anxiety, well, also I'll say again, it thrives most in uncertainty, as we kind of already said. But we want to go in maybe into what are some of the main anxiety types that you might maybe notice, maybe in yourself, or maybe in the people you support or manage. So these titles, I like to say, are a little bit they are siloed, but many times people can have traits of maybe all of them, but they had to categorize them a little bit to delineate them a little bit. So we have generalized anxiety disorder, which is maybe just if we're not worrying about something, we're worrying about something else. If it's not our health, it's maybe the future. If it's not the future, it's that, something bad is going to happen when I go into work. It's worrying about work the night before. It's an awful lot of these kind of things. Panic attacks, which we'll go into. It's kind of the heightenedest level of anxiety that we can get almost. Social anxiety, more particular to worrying about maybe what other people think or how we are perceived in those situations. OCD, which we've maybe heard of. We'll go into each one of these in turn. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And I mean, who doesn't have a little bit of trauma, or who hasn't had, something happen to them? So this can play out in how we perform in work and how we enjoy life. And then phobias as well, which can be another piece. So to go to each one, we're going to look at each one and maybe give a little bit of information about how they can maybe show up in the workplace. So as we said, GAD, or generalized anxiety disorder, involves persistent excessive worry about various aspects of daily life. Could be about work, health, finances, relationships, and it's difficult to control, and it normally gets worse over time rather than better. And how it could present in the workplace could be, you might notice that your employee is constantly worrying, or constantly maybe thinking in the negative, worrying about meeting deadlines, job performance, or even small tasks, perhaps leading to overworking. Maybe their behaviors, they're taking all their work home with them, and you're seeing somebody who nearly in some ways can be maybe a manager's dream. In some ways, God, they get everything done and they're all this, that, the other, but they might actually be teetering towards a burnout, or despite evidence about how well they perform, they're constantly berating themselves. Another trait that is huge when it comes to work and anxiety that you might notice is perfectionism. So again, that might be frequently rechecking work, redoing tasks, finding it hard to complete projects because they're never good enough. The perfectionist often never really gets to the stage where they're truly satisfied, even when on the days where they do reach a level of excellence or perfection, instead of feeling, really proud of themselves, it's nearly all they get is a parasympathetic or rest and digest bit of relief, phew, nothing went wrong today, rather than, wow, we're actually really smashing it and we're doing well. No leeway with themselves. You may see someone with GAD maybe frequently procrastinating, avoiding, possibly someone who waits until the last minute to complete tasks, or as I've seen, I've seen this even in a couple of, very very high powered kind of jobbed individuals. They wait until the last minute to make decisions. They're holding on to, they want all the options to be explored before they make a decision, or before they submit something. They wait until the last minute, double checking. Resistant to change in work systems, possibly over preparation. Someone who spends excessive time in minor details, or fears catastrophic consequences for small mistakes, excessive seeking of reassurance. So, and I mean, I think maybe sometimes we can all fall into some of these, but if this is a constant pattern with someone, you might have something like GAD or general anxiety at the back of your mind. So social anxiety, again, could be a fear of being judged, embarrassed, or humiliated in social or performance situations. such as meetings or presentations. So this might present in the workplace. It could be someone who is avoiding group activities, avoiding meetings, team projects, or work-related social events due to fear. And I suppose, sometimes, especially since, well, founding Anxiety Ireland now, I nearly notice nearly most of the rudeness or the people not getting back to me or the avoidance, which can be a bit irritating. If you look at it through that lens of anxiety, you probably see you're looking at something different. How easy is it for us to get annoyed or triggered? Oh, they just don't want to work. They just don't want to turn up. Well, actually, there could be something like social anxiety disorder or some kind of fear that is leading to that behavior. So, just something to bear in mind. You might see it in an employee who has a difficulty speaking up, struggling to voice opinions or ideas. Perhaps they have some missed opportunities for contribution. They maybe feel invisible in the workplace. I've had many clients who say, they feel like they don't belong in the team. They feel different. They feel weird compared to everybody else, which can be kind of a huge problem for them. Of course, presentation anxiety is a huge piece. Extreme anxiety when required to give a presentation, maybe accompanied by physical symptoms such as sweating, shaking, rapid heart rate. Let's say maybe, especially with your new hires, it could be good to check in with this with them. I doubt many people have ever even been asked, like, and how do you find presentations? Is that an issue for you? Could be a really supportive thing to ask, that I think for most people they're a worst nightmare. So thank God you guys are all on a WAMinar and I can't see you, you know. But yeah, of course, who doesn't get a little bit anxious with a presentation? And isolation. One thing you might look out for: tendency to work alone, avoid conversations. These are maybe folks that, and of course, you can't force people to these things, but they're probably not coming to the lunch or to the Christmas do and things like that. And that might be their own reasons. They could be busy with family, and whatever. But also, if you notice excessive isolation, it's okay to just check in. Like, is everything okay? How do you feel comfortable in the team? So another piece then to make you guys aware of is panic. So we probably all heard of like things like panic attacks or panic disorder as it's categorized. So these can be sudden recurrent panic attacks, intense episodes of fear accompanied by physical symptoms such as racing heart, shortness of breath, dizziness. So I'd sort of say a panic attack is often where anxiety tricks our mind into believing that perhaps we're dying, we're losing our mind, or we're going to faint or something really bad is going to happen. And if as I said, your nervous system is always listening to what's going on in your mind. If you already feel a little bit anxious and you're going, God, what's this going on with my heart? And then a thought goes through your head, oh my God, this is going to be awful. I'm going to pass out. I'm going to die. I'm going to faint. When your nervous system listens to that, well, it probably then sends your fight or flight, goes into the outer stratosphere. So that's where these panic attacks can occur and people get extremely, flushed, overwhelmed, get that sudden urge to just run out of a room. And it can be quite traumatizing, imagine being convinced that you're going to die over and over again. It actually is quite traumatizing and often leads to the occurrence then of having anxiety about the anxiety or feeling like you don't want to okay, well, that happened in that meeting room. I'm not going to go to that meeting room, or I'm going to sit by the door in case if this happens again, so I can make a quick escape. But often all those things we do to mitigate it actually can bring it on even worse. So how this can present in the workplace, you may see, a sudden panic attack may occur during a stressful situation, a tight deadline, a confrontation, causing an employee to leave abruptly or just shut down. So maybe they go into like a freeze type response, a deer in the headlights, and just, completely shut down. There might be, as I said, those fears of triggers, avoiding certain tasks, environments, or meetings, being around maybe they've had an issue with a manager or a fellow employee, they may avoid that, or avoiding places where they believe a panic attack might occur. crowded spaces or intense discussions. You might notice a level of increased absenteeism, frequent time off due to fear of experiencing panic attacks or needing to cool down in the aftermath of a panic attack, and sort of hypervigilance as well as a real sign. If you see somebody's body language tightening up, their breath starting to get shallow, they're almost, you'll notice it when somebody begins to go into that space. Yeah, you can maybe intervene and ask someone just to slow down. Sometimes breathing into that old trick with a paper bag, actually, I believe it does work, or doing maybe a breathing technique can often help, but so disruptive to somebody's work if they're worried about having panic attacks in work. Then things like OCD may become an element. So that stands for obsessive compulsive disorder, which involves persistent unwanted thoughts, obsessions, repetitive behaviors that need to be performed to relieve anxiety in the workplace. So this may also appear as perfectionism and rechecking. They may need to repeatedly check their work, draft emails, deadlines. So it's a little bit similar to general anxiety, but even to give an example, I had somebody recently they were working in a laboratory, and their OCD was kind of a fear of contamination. And what would often happen is they'd often be really late for work because they'd spend an hour or two in the morning trying to pick out which clothes weren't contaminated, and they'd have rituals around how to put those on. So it can be quite disruptive. Again, it might be fear of making mistakes, but could often be fear of things like contamination. I've seen people, they're afraid to put fuel in the petrol tank because of fears of contamination. Their rituals which they feel they need to do to reduce uncertainty. And OCD often maybe goes back to things in childhood, a feeling of not being in control, in an unsafe environment, can really kind of flare up. So normally, if somebody's having OCD symptoms, it's a little bit more obvious and they might already be working with a therapist, but not necessarily. And OCD, like others, can get worse over time. So compulsive behaviors, you may see them engage in repetitive behaviors. A big one is often compulsive hand washing. And actually, COVID was something that really, although it was necessary to do that hand washing for people with OCD, it was almost like a green light for those behaviors, I need to keep doing this. You might see organizing files, you might see turning lights on and off. And it's a huge drain on them mentally, physically, and with their time. So and again, just a high level of difficulty with uncertainty, struggle with incomplete task decision and needing reassurance. So OCD isn't as common as the others, but just those are some of the more things about it that maybe stand out. And then, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Again, as I said, who doesn't have maybe some trauma, but if somebody has, maybe especially after something happens, like your colleague returns after a car accident, or after something physical happens to them, they have an accident, or even someone they love has an accident, you might see somebody who's almost like more in a severe anxiety state. Maybe they have talked about nightmares, flashbacks, hypervigilance, avoidance of triggers. They might have hyperarousal, as we said, that might be triggered by something being dropped, or someone drops a stapler or something, and then they're jumping out of their skin. Could be intense flashbacks. You could see someone, excuse me, who's way more emotional. You could be thinking that this is, if it's connected to something that's recently happened. You might notice someone has suddenly become more irritable or emotionally numb after an event, or sleep disturbances. So someone might be coming in late, they're not sleeping at night, and they might have a lot of fatigue, difficulty concentrating, or reduced productivity. So phobias then are maybe a specific type of anxiety. This is the last subtype. that might lead to an irrational fear of specific object, situation, or activity. So you can see that, take up the top, the clown there could be too much, or like arachnophobia, fear of spiders. Um, like I myself have a bit of a phobia of dead things. If I've come across a dead animal, I'll just jump out of my skin. Um, but what ones you might see in work might be, again, glossophobia. This is maybe beyond the usual kind of public speaking fear. Extreme anxiety over public speaking, completely shut down. You might see an environmental phobia, fear of elevators, heights, or flying might affect their ability to attend meetings in high-rise buildings, especially if someone's anxious, or has a little bit of anxiety. Maybe if you're asking them to do those kind of things, just maybe if you remember, ask if it's okay. Are they okay with flying? Are they okay with traveling from work or being away from home? For some, they might just go, yeah, of course, yeah, that's going to be great. But for others, that might actually be a little bit of an anxiety trigger. They might, see an awful lot of avoidance situations, e.g., declining promotions that involve travel, limiting career growth, and physical symptoms. If somebody's phobia is kind of triggered, I know someone who's got a phobia of milk, for instance. If someone left a thing of milk out on the counter, they could have a sudden reaction, such as like a real ick, a sweat, a trembling, nausea when exposed to the phobia. So yeah, I hope it wasn't too tough to go through all of our different types, but just, yeah, it's good to have a little bit in your mind, but the ones you may see the most would be general anxiety, social anxiety, and panic. Panic would probably be the big ones. So on to the next section, we want to look at, well, what are some of the barriers faced by those with anxiety in securing employment, and a little bit of their development and confidence. But in terms of securing employment, unfortunately, sometimes anxiety, when there's an excessive amount of inner pressure or high level of perfectionism or worry, can cause a little bit of procrastination, avoiding even applying for jobs, fear of failure before even looking. I've had so many clients who just tell me it's just dead cert, it's not going to work out. And what happens? They have the interview and it goes really well. They get the job, but it can really be a barrier to even getting started. And if anyone here is in that category or struggling to get started, they're definitely it can be overcome. A huge piece for people is, I don't know who does like interviews, but yeah, for folks with anxiety, can be interview anxiety, fear of being judged, making mistakes can lead to poor performance in interviews. I think the best advice I can maybe give there is just even admitting, when you go in, that, yeah, they say, how are you? Say, oh, I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm glad to be here. Just even acknowledging it and bringing it into the room is a huge bonus. Having to hide it. Um, anyone interviewing will know that interviews are tough, and thinking that they're going to judge, or that they're gonna eat you alive for dinner, um, it makes the situation a lot worse. But if you just even let them know, oh yeah, look, of course, a bit nervous, but happy to be here, naming it, acknowledging it, not trying to hide it, really then dissipates it, and then you'll get into your flow. So of course, with social anxiety, we might also miss networking opportunities, going to jobs fairs, going up and chatting to people, even having the audacity to ask, oh, are you looking for anybody? Or, asking a friend for a tip. Oh, I hear you work there. How is it there? So it can definitely limit that. Can also be a little bit of a gap to explain if there are mental health related employment gaps, which can also, lower self-esteem and make it difficult. But, I think that piece can be overestimated by folks with anxiety. So we try and, well, let's look at the positives in your CV rather than just the gaps or the negatives, and stress, how you're doing now. And then in terms of career development, as we've kind of said, all these things, there could be what could impede their development and confidence, a fear of failure. They say, when Thomas Edison said, they said, how does it feel to be the man who made the light bulb, or created the light bulb? He said, well, actually, I'm the man who made the light bulb wrong 999 times before I got it right. So, failure falling upward and failure is so important. But with anxiety, it can be, you know, really seen in black and white terms. Maybe that's a growing up thing, you know, how failure was dealt with at home. But that fear of failure can avoid taking responsibilities, taking risks, going in for promotions. So that can be a huge piece that keeps people stuck in fear. And I'd often also say as well, you know, to clients, well, if we're looking at, you know, you've been 6 months in a job or a year in a job, or you've been newly promoted, say, well, since then, has your competence increased? Do you know more now than on the first day? Normally the answer is nearly always yes. But then I'd ask, well, and what about your confidence? Has your confidence increased? They nearly always say, well, actually, no, it hasn't. My confidence is getting less. So I'd always say that's a good barometer. If your competencies are going up, but your confidence is middling or is even going down, then there's probably pointing to something, maybe an outlook or a mindset that would indicate maybe fear of failure, being harsh on yourself, or anxiety. Again, perfectionism. They believe that things should be perfect, shoulds, rigidity, no excuses, high pressured, maybe avoiding leadership roles, reluctance to take those on, probably reluctance to ask for support. We'll cover that in more detail at the end. But fear of being viewed as weak or less competent may prevent them from asking for help. As well, you know, we touched on the idea of an imposter syndrome, this kind of anxiety of inadequacy, even when they're performing well. Again, that's confidence, competence thing, you know, of like, oh, well, yeah, I've been getting away with it up until now. If you talk to yourself like that, or, you know, if you know somebody who's always looking out for that, there could be something there with anxiety. A concept that is really prevalent is high functioning anxiety. So again, that's hidden secret anxiety behind a confident and high functioning facade. I've worked with so many managing directors, CEOs, you know, CFOs, and people who, on the outward looking in, nobody would ever suspect. But deep down, there is a deep rooted insecurity or a high pressure where, you know, before meetings or before things, it's really quite hellish for them. So, you know, even in your most high performing individuals, you know, it still is okay to ask, like, oh, and do you find the work stressful? Do you find yourself getting worried about it or anxious about it in advance? You might just be giving that person permission to finally say, actually, yeah, sometimes I do. Um, you know, another piece is that some companies, obviously nobody who's here, but, you know, some companies can have a lack of mental health support, um, you know, where it's not seen as a thing and it might not be prioritized. Again, contributing maybe to a culture where mental health isn't discussed or isn't acknowledged. So those are some of the barriers. But now again, let's go maybe a little bit deeper in if you have maybe a sense that somebody you're working with has maybe a little bit of anxiety, or you know that they have a little bit of anxiety, if you're watching to see does it get worse or is it a piece, you might want to just, you know, look at some of these areas that we talked about. Observe changes in behavior. Anyone perhaps exhibiting restlessness or seeming excessively tense or jumpy, you might, you know, it could be a bad day, but if you're noticing that as a team, it might be okay just to check in and say, look, you know, are you okay? Are you, are you feeling more anxious coming to work these days or something like that? You know, that it is kind of, without going into being a therapist, it is maybe okay just to maybe ask these things and then say, well, look, you know, we'll talk about what supports you can offer later. Noticing someone withdrawing from participation in meetings, social interactions, maybe they're less chatty with customers, avoidance, demonstrating irritability, unusual impatience, showing signs of fatigue or being easily overwhelmed. And that's what I often find, you know, irritability or nearly sometimes even aggression is actually when people feel vulnerable, that they go into those places. So just, yeah, you know, just watching the signs, sudden changes or gradual changes in someone's behavior might be a sign. Some of the physical symptoms. Have some tea. frequent headaches, maybe tension pains, noticeable restlessness like leg shaking, fidgeting, shortness of breaths. Somebody you notice is like, like really kind of shallow kind of breathing, and it's going with the eyes are wide or the vein in the head. You're kind of going, okay, there's something obviously physiological happening here. Excessive sweating, especially when not attributed to physical exertion. Those can be some signs of physical. Then you might also want to listen, as you said, how does this person communicate? How do they talk to themselves, and how do they talk to others? These could be some sort of indicators. If you see a sudden increase in critical or negative comments, like, oh, I can't do anything right, or I'm such an idiot, or you know just getting really kind of negative, or even into stuff like, oh, what's the point of even being here and doing this? Some thoughts like that, or maybe as a manager, definitely a flag or something really to pick up on and check in with. Somebody who, is maybe you're noticing speaking rapidly, or conversely struggling to articulate thoughts. With chronic anxiety and with depression, brain fog maybe at play. Somebody who's under an awful lot of pressure, the normal way they think or speak might alter. Again, less chatty, more sullen, or articulating worries, what ifs, all or nothing. If we don't get this deadline met, then everything is screwed, or it's all going to go to hell. Any kind of statements like that, you just, if they're becoming a pattern, it's like just a little bit of awareness of that. And someone overly worried about deadlines and work quality beyond the typical professional concern. You might notice as well, changes in work performance. As I said, some of these are the things we can easily go, oh, they're just not pulling their weight, they're just a messer or whatever. But actually, this could be indicating, that the person's mental health is not in the best way. So again, somebody with difficulty concentrating on tasks or completing assignments. Maybe they've suddenly started making loads of errors or lapses of judgment, and we kind of go, oh, you should know better, but actually maybe there's something going on. Procrastination or unusually poor time management, inconsistent work quality or noticeable drop in productivity, excessive forgetfulness, making mistakes, seeming not to care, maybe heading towards that idea of burnout. And I really have worked with so many clients who have kind of said, Jesus, I've been in there, I've been nearly open and honest about my mental health, and I've told them at various times that I struggle, and they still come down on me like a ton of bricks when a mistake happens, and never ask, am I okay? Is everything okay? So just, I really say, remember that sometimes these changes in work performance it's not personal to you. They're not maybe giving a finger to the company or to the organization. There could be an awful lot going on behind the scenes. And maybe for you guys then, maybe it's sort of understand the context. I know we have to have professional boundaries, but maybe sometimes personal or professional circumstances can give you a hint that you or colleague might be struggling with anxiety. So again, sometimes you're looking out for recent changes in personal life, such as bereavement, relationship breakdown. Should throw in there, landlords selling up, or cost of living issues, or someone getting married, welcoming a new child. Although these things can be joyous, some of them they can also be quite anxiety inducing. If there's overwhelming workloads, high stress work environments, or demanding customers, that may also be a factor. Sometimes team dynamics or management changes and may not be openly discussed. That's the thing, you have employees who are there for 20 years, and you start suddenly going, okay, we're going to change all the systems, and it's going to all be tech, and it's all going to be, run on a new cloud AI platform. Great ideas, but may also cause a bit of consternation and worry and fear in some of the team. So we're kind of nearly coming into the last two areas we're going to focus on. So how can you guys, maybe as managers or people who support people in roles, provide accommodations and support for colleagues? So the first thing you could do is creating a supportive environment, that it's okay to talk about these topics, maybe having initiatives, on different things, like it was Suicide Prevention Day, Mental Health Day, Men's Health Day, Women's Health Day, having open communication, encourage conversations about mental health to reduce stigma, whether it's in one-to-one check-ins or group check-ins that you have, have it on the agenda for meetings when you're checking in with people. How is your well-being? Is there a lot of stress coming from the environment, or how do you feel the work is affecting you? Are you worrying a lot about the work? Is it changing the way you do things? So just relaying that openly. Education, maybe provide your managers mental health training, or maybe there could be a peer support training or an external facilitator or a workshop or a webinar, just so that employees can better understand anxiety for themselves and how it might affect their work and or personal life. Could be really good to have clear policies, develop and share mental health policies. Maybe it's in your employee handbook, maybe it's in your induction pack, or maybe it's just on the wall in the staff canteen, just that outline the supports available and accommodations. Flexible work options, sometimes, especially if someone's coming back from being off with anxiety or mental health, or just in general, if you think you can and you think it would help and they're telling you it would help, offering remote work, flexible hours, reduced hours during stressful periods, you know, paying people back for their time in lieu, all those kind of things can just really, really help. Telling employees, I don't want you checking those emails when you're off on holidays. That's often a big safety kind of behavior for people who are anxious. Could be blue in the face telling people, and can you turn your phone off on the weekend, or your work phone, not check your emails. Sometimes when there's like, oh, but what if something comes in and I miss it? And that's affecting into their off time. So really trying to delineate what's expected of people when they're in work and what's not expected of them when they're off work. And the whole right to switch off is now kind of legally a thing, which is great. Perhaps a quiet space or two in your office. Create quiet rooms, areas for employees to decompress during moments of overwhelm. Just having a little chill out space. Some practical accommodations. Maybe, you might do this with, obviously, with HR and OT in some of your roles, but sometimes reducing someone's workload can be really key if they're coming back from burnout or from a lot of anxiety, or coming back from even a physical injury, and they could be worried about how am I gonna slot back in. Well, make that clear, that you can provide adjusted deadlines, reduce workloads for employees struggling with anxiety. Maybe have regular check-ins. So, as we said, supportive conversations to feel that they feel supported. And an EAP is often a good idea, employee assistance program. They can often be, they're often in place in a lot of big organizations, but having worked in an EAP myself for like 8 years, I know, at least from the one I was working in previously, it was completely confidential. We didn't tell people, the companies or the managers who used the service, so just really maybe getting your EAP in to do a talk and just to promote it out, have the cards in your desk, be able to tell them, our student counselling services or whatever the local link is, that you can be that person who signposts without needing to get into their mental health stuff, but just tell them what you've noticed and tell them these are some of the supports. Wellness programs, sometimes like mindfulness, stress management, could be yoga, could be anything, that you want to bring in, just that there is a little bit of time during your weeks to acknowledge wellness and to check in. And then finally, or nearly coming to finally, what we could say is also offer support without assumptions. Approach your colleagues maybe privately and express concern in a non-judgmental way. It could be crucial to ask open-ended questions and listen actively. You might say, I've noticed you seemed really stressed lately. I just want to check in. Is there anything you'd like to talk about or anything I can do to help? Again, they might tell you, no, I don't know where you're getting that from. I don't want to talk about that. But at least, you've asked. They might come back to you later and go, do you know what? Actually, I was kind of fibbing there. I do actually have a lot to talk about. So, or they might actually tell you straight up what's going on. So, I'd often say that, especially you have the relationships with these people, that it is okay just to check in and just say, I'm just curious, or just checking in. Um, I've just noticed you seem, any of those symptoms, I noticed you seem a bit jumpy. I noticed, you're handing in the work a little bit late or last minute, which maybe, it's like, it's not a big deal, but I'm just wondering, are you okay? Is there anything I can do to help? Encourage professional help. Again, remembering you're not mental health professionals, but if your colleague is open to that, you know where to start. Again, EAP, GP, are often places they can go. IACP, Irish Association Counselling Psychotherapy, list of counsellors online that they can explore. And again, we've kind of already said, just fostering that inclusive environment, maintain confidentiality and respect. Tell them that. I'd say, look, this is totally confidential. People will often worry about it getting out around the office that, oh, I'm struggling. But, say that colleagues, that your mental health information is confidential, and, respecting their privacy, them feeling they can trust you with this stuff, reinforces your support. Like, I've had many people, even it might just be, I'm doing great in the role, but this public speaking thing is I'm terrified it's going to be so bad that, a manager who has their confidence might say, well, I'll just be there to step in if you run into any difficulty. And often then the person I'm thinking of in particular then absolutely, smashed the presentation and was really, really great, and now is doing it without supports. But, you can just be there, be that trusted person for someone, can really help their mental health, their career development, and their work-life balance. Yeah, so I think then, we're on to maybe the final few slides, which again is really just reasons people may not disclose. We've already kind of touched on that people might not want their information going around the office, who really would, but there can really still be in Ireland today a fear of stigma, concerned about being labeled or treated differently by colleagues or manager. I'll never get promoted if they know that I'm struggling with this. I'll never, it'll never work for me. They're going to see me differently. And that's where, even leading from the front with that, of even saying, well, look, yeah, I've struggled too. Everyone here has probably struggled at some stage. This, something like anxiety, depression, it's not a permanent fixture or a deterministic character trait. You can struggle with these things, but you can also get through them and get over them. And actually, in some ways, sometimes they can make you stronger, make you more compassionate, or sometimes it's a wake-up call. Right, actually, I need to redefine, my work-life balance, or I need to look at, well, why do I put so much pressure on myself? It can actually set you up then to be a better, maybe manager or employee going forward. So I think, trying to reduce that stigma and say, look, mental health stuff, it happens, and it's okay. This doesn't change the way we see you. Of course, people will worry about their job security, we've already said, fear of judgment. That's where, maybe the confidentiality again is really important. Their perfectionism, catastrophizing, comparison. They'll probably think, this is the end of the world. It's so unacceptable. I'm the only one this happens to. Everyone else gets on totally fine. My career will be over. Beating themselves up. Again, I think it's really important to just through that environment and through your own words and actions to nip that in the bud for them. Sometimes I nearly assume that that's nearly what people are thinking, that there probably is a level of this. And then you can kind of, debunk those myths. Everyone struggles. And of course, then the impact of that, we've got increased stress, silently people teetering towards burnout. decreased productivity, isolation, and all these things, you know, if they're going on in silence around you, again, it's not always your fault if you don't notice these things. But again, you know, that's where, God, I haven't heard of anyone feeling anxious or stressed in a while. Everything must be great. Maybe it's a, you know, that could be a nice thing to believe, but also maybe it's okay to assume, well, actually, maybe I should just throw it out there again. Are people just not sharing this with me because they are afraid of disclosing it? So, you know, I'd say keep throwing that out there to your employees or to the people you support. Keep putting it in on the agenda. Mental health check-in. Are people how are we managing the workload? How's everything going? You know, does anyone want to come to me in confidence after the meeting? All those kind of things, just that it's part of the normal conversation. And it's just encouraging, again, confidentiality, clear policies, supportive leadership. That's you guys who came here today. And yeah, I really think that by spreading that message of like support, openness, that there's clarity around these things, can really support whether it's people who are brand new hires coming in, getting a taste of the culture in your organization, or people who have been there since the year dot, who have moved up the ladder. You know, that it can affect anyone at any stage, from a new hire to a managing director, CEO. And yeah, if we can kind of change the way we talk about it, have it more on the agenda and clear, we can certainly, you know, do a lot to reduce the harms to individuals, and yeah, just preserve people's mental health while probably getting better outcomes for organizations with you know, in achieving their missions, and yeah, making the world a better place. So guys, that's pretty much it from me for now, but we do have like 15 minutes for questions. So I don't know, does Alice or anyone want to come in there and we can go from there? Sorry, Alice, I can't hear you. I don't know if anyone else. Will I stop share? Sorry.
Can you hear me now, Michael?
Yeah.
There we go. Tech issues, always fun for the anxiety. So thank you so much for that, Michael. That was really informative, some really great tips and kind of advice there for employers and employees. And so there are actually a couple of questions here in the Q&A feature, which is great. So thank you so much to people for submitting them. So the first one that came through there was, do you have any thoughts on how somatic therapy or other body-based approaches might help manage or reduce workplace anxiety? Or if there are any specific techniques you might recommend to calm the nervous system in a high-pressure environment?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I suppose, yeah, somatic and body focused psychotherapy is actually an area I'm really interested in and practice a little bit with clients. And that might be the idea of, you know, like say an awful lot of our stress and trauma, we're holding it in our body. And the way I see it is, awful lot of times nobody likes going into those dark places. And you know, we have things like, oh well, you know, big boys big girls don't cry, don't be sad. You know, we get conditioned in that way to cut off a little bit from emotions. And what body focused can do is really help us to focus back in and sit with emotions. And emotions are, you know, sensations and surges of energy that just want to be felt. So I do always think that by being able to tolerate emotions, and including the emotion, you know, or the unpleasant feeling of uncertainty that drives an awful lot of anxiety, you can actually um kind of then increase your capacity to cope with it. Because normally we go, I don't like this, I don't like this. I go, and then people go up into their head and they just start worrying and worrying and worrying. And that makes their nervous system go more and more. Then they start changing their behavior. And then it just, the whole cycle kind of locks and loads again. I don't know how you might actually bring somatic therapy into a group context in work, but I recommend it for any individual.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff that maybe also works is like mindfulness, you know, like body scans, being able to just tolerate and stay with the body sensations. Maybe that's like a nice, relaxing alternative for maybe like a work environment.
Mm.
And you said one technique that is really good for high pressure environments or high stressful situations. One that I discovered about maybe during COVID that I now do all the time myself and give to all my clients is a breathing technique called 4-7-8. So some of you have probably heard of that. So it involves breathing in for 4 seconds through the nose, holding it for 7 seconds, and then blowing it out like through pursed lips for 8. Like you're sort of like blowing it out almost like you're trying to blow through a straw. So it's in for 4, hold for 7, out through a straw for 8. And it's like 19 seconds per round. It's fine if you do three to 4 to 5 rounds of that. It's really relieving, and
Mm.
it really can sort of trigger that other side of the nervous system, the rest and digest. Your shoulders may drop. You may start to want to yawn, which is always a good sign that you're relaxing, just starting to feel a bit more regulated. Your thoughts might slow down, your heart rate might go down. It's a really, really great tool. So 4-7-8, definitely look that one up. I think I do it at the start of group sessions sometimes, or do it myself, stuck in traffic,
Mm.
have to do something. Did a couple of rounds before I did this. So yeah, really, really good.
Great, yeah, and I think things like that, like breathing techniques or anything that like you can do as an individual are really helpful in the workplace, because you can often feel kind of lost at sea a bit about like, I don't know what to do, or even like I don't have money for counselling and all this type of stuff. Whereas breathing techniques are very, accessible for a lot of people. So that's really great. Thank you so much for sharing that. So one of the questions here is, I've noticed a higher prevalence of younger people who have anxiety compared to older people. Maybe firstly, do you agree with that? And also any thoughts on like maybe why that might be?
Yeah, well, definitely I would kind of agree, but I would say that I see an awful lot of older people too that come for therapy with anxiety, but also perhaps younger people in their 20s, maybe less of them can afford therapy at the moment with the cost of living piece. So I'd say I think that it could be entirely plausible. And maybe there's all of those factors involved as well. Again, it's like the kind of the cost of living, the cost of housing, the recent things that they've gone through, um, when you think about, the war in Gaza, the war in Ukraine, the COVID, all these kind of things, and probably, the average number of hours spent on a phone is, probably like 4 or 5. There's probably our statistics out there, but there's quite a lot of that going on, quite a lot of comparison. I don't blame social media or go, think technology is in itself a bad thing, but I can kind of see how for younger people that might increase their kind
Yeah.
of level of anxiety. There's certainly the piece of, nearly digital natives, as you might call them. They've grown up always with technology versus kind of digital migrants, who maybe didn't have it. Smartphones maybe came out when they were older, and you see they have probably less of a likening for like picking up the telephone and making a phone call, or going in and doing something face to face. It's nearly like, oh no, I'll send an email. That's something that definitely would notice quite a bit with younger people.
Mm. I've
And
noticed as well, in maybe a younger generation, I've certainly noticed it, is climate anxiety. I think is something people don't realize is quite prevalent. Younger people are very rightly so, but very concerned about climate change, the impact of that on the world, what that means for the future, and that's actually a really big point of anxiety, I think, for a lot of people.
1,000,000%, yeah, definitely eco and climate anxiety do get more and more of that kind of coming in.
Mm.
Mhm.
Okay, great. And there's a couple more questions here, so we might keep going. So let me get the next one. Okay, so one here was asking, like, how do you manage when you're in fight or flight? Like, what steps can be taken to get yourself back to a regulated state?
Yeah, so I think again, things like, well, for the first step I would always say is noticing that you're in that state, and like noticing, okay, what's going on with my body?
Mm.
Because we can get very caught up and nearly swept down river by the fight or flight, and then we're up into our head, and then as the more fight or flight we get, normally the more negative or catastrophic our thoughts get, becomes kind of like a loop,
Mm.
you know, a bit of a spiral and a cycle. So first is maybe knowing what are your signs and symptoms. You know, are your shoulders glued to your ears? Are you someone who your breath starts to go, your heart rate starts to go, you notice sweating, or you're feeling more irritable?
Mm.
You might be some or none of those, but you probably have your own telltale signs. Could be your stomach is off, you get butterflies in your tummy, or your hands are cold. Whatever they are, first notice the signs. Then I'd say, you know, employ some methods to help you to ground, especially if it's something that maybe you're worried about. That is something that maybe you know, sometimes they say worrying about something you can't do anything about yet, or you can only do something about it when it happens, or even if you're just in a very stressed, high-paced environment, to just take that little bit of time to notice what's going on. And, you know, even in the most busy of times, you know, we can all maybe get 2 or 3 minutes
Mhm.
sometime before we start something new, before we dive into the next task, or in between meetings. Like, can't overestimate the importance of that. Just taking a few minutes to ground. Another thing you can do is, you know, grounding techniques, distraction kind of techniques, maybe like one for panic. They call it the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You know, looking for
Mm.
5 things around you that you, it's kind of a mindfulness exercise, 5 things around you that you can see, and, you know, name them. You know, I can see a tree, a window, a bird. I'm looking out a window. I can see a computer. I can see a mug. And then, you know, maybe 4 things that you can hear. I hear a plane. I hear the hum of the computer. I hear the wind. You know, 3 things you can touch. Okay, I can touch. I feel my mustache, or I feel the shirt on my back, feel my feet on the ground. 2 things you can maybe taste, and 1 thing you can smell.
Mm.
And the idea, and you might find it hard to go, well, what can I smell? You have to really notice, what can I taste? And what you do is you do that once, and then you go through it again, but you go through it slower and slower and slower. Because again, the mind is always listening to what's going on. So if you can like disrupt that negative thought pattern, your body may start to calm down, relax. Naturally, the fight or flight isn't going up. So you can distract it. And also, you know, breathing techniques, muscle relaxation, could be butterfly tapping is another one I often give out, which is just doing this alternate tapping, which kind of activates the nervous system and activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It's almost like being rocked a little bit like a baby, and just might start to make you, oh, okay, you want to let go of that anxiety. Oh, you want to sigh. All these physiological cues and breathing. You know, find ones that kind of work for you to keep your fight or flight, keep the baseline of it like a little bit lower.
Yeah. I think those like the one you're talking about with the senses, like again, similar to like breathing techniques, are accessible for people to be able to do by themselves. But
Yeah.
also I guess the whole point of them really is to bring yourself back into your body and like refocus your mind. So I think they're really great examples of things that people can do maybe quite easily. I think it just takes a little bit of practice sometimes. It can feel a bit strange starting them. But it does just take practice a lot of the time. So I know we do have a lot more questions, but we're just running out of a little bit of time. So I might just close it up there, Michael. Would you like to have any last maybe remarks or tips before I close the session?
Well, just maybe to say, if people want, if they have questions they really want answered, you could go send me an email at info@anxietyireland.ie.
Yeah.
You know, if that's something you really want to, I'm more than happy to say, I was at the WAMinar, and just I'll just like fire back some thoughts. Very, very happy to do so. And yeah, as final thoughts, just like, well done everyone for turning up and wanting to learn more about anxiety. And I think, you know, together by spreading awareness and being more informed and more compassionate, we can really, really help people get into and stay in employment and feel fulfilled. And yeah, it's just been great to be here, and thank you so much for listening.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Michael. And we will share the information for Anxiety Ireland and the links and the emails and everything in our follow-up with the slides. So just to close the session, I'd just really like to thank yourself, Michael, from Anxiety Ireland, and to thank Deirdre Moore on tech support today, and also PCR for providing the captions. As always, your feedback on the webinars is really important to us. So we do have a short survey for you to fill out. We'll share that in the email that we send around, and I think it's already been shared in the chat previously. So you can copy that into your browser if you wouldn't mind giving us a bit of feedback on that. So to keep an eye on our website, which is www.ahead.ie, for details on any upcoming events. And if you're not already on the WAMinar mailing list, but you'd like to be added, you can reach out to us at wam@ahead.ie so that you are notified when our next event date and topic are selected. So if you do have any suggestions for future WAMinar topics, we'd love to hear from them. And I believe we do ask you that question in the survey. And just a huge thank you to all the viewers today. I know 90 minutes is a big chunk of your day to take out, so we really appreciate your support and providing these kind of learning opportunities for employers and employees alike. So thank you so much, and thank you, Michael, and I hope everyone has a lovely lunch.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.